Welcome to the SDDC Virtual Symposium Keynote Conversation with Datera CEO Guy Churchward and HPE Sales Leader, U.S. Storage and Software Thomas Sabol. Here's your host, Principal Analyst and Practice Director at Enterprise Strategy Group, Mark Peters.
Welcome wherever you are watching. Oh, a ripple, thank you. Thank you very much, it's great to be here. You always have to remember for these things that are both being streamed and people are watching all around the world and maybe watching some other time, never to say good afternoon, good morning or whatever. So just welcome, I'm glad you made the time to do this. We hope this will be not just a valuable use of your time, but frankly entertaining as well. We've been, I wouldn't say rehearsing, that would be a little too grand, but we have been chatting about what we're going to talk about, and I think you'll find it different, engaging, and as I say, educational a little bit as well. My name is Mark Peters. I'm an analyst at the Enterprise Strategy Group. Have been doing that for about 12 years, and as you can probably tell by the distinct shiny white colour of my hair, I've been around this business a long time. That's relevant because of what is changing. I came into the storage world, IT therefore, more than 30 years ago. And if you think about what we're here to talk about, this is the SDDC, Software Defined Data Center Symposium. It's a mouthful, sounds a little bit, frankly, wordy and dry. We're going to try and take the covers off that, explode it, make it more interesting, make it more, frankly, relevant. And the reason I talk about those 30 years is just think what has changed. When I came into the business, everything was about you just bought another box. Basically, that's what you did. Actually, you didn't buy another box. You bought 27 other boxes, and then another 54. And then you desperately tried to make them work together. And there were people running around in whatever the equivalent 35 years ago was of Birkenstocks and white coats, literally sometimes, trying to make all this stuff come together. So we're going to drill down into this today. I'm very pleased to be here. One of the reasons I'm pleased to be here is that this is not, and I want to stress this because it's really important, this is not a pitch for one company or two companies. This is actually a generic discussion about a very important industry topic, and that's what we want to take the covers off. The way this is being done, certainly Datera is leading this, and I'm going to have both Datera and HPE on the stage with me in just a little bit, behind that lovely desk with that lovely microphone, which doesn't work, of course. The desk might work, the microphone certainly doesn't. But what has been happening, and I want to get the names of the members correct here, is that a few months ago, because this is such an integrated and important concept, this whole SDDC thing, it requires more than one company, more than perhaps one approach. It's a concept that is valuable to end users. And as a result, Datera got together a group of companies, we'll call them the coalition for want of something better. In today's world, to be quite honest, it's nice to see some cooperation rather than conflict all the time. But that group is Datera, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Mellanox, Intel, Cumulus, Scality, and Weka.io. And by having so many people involved, when you come back tomorrow, hopefully, and see more of the in-depth pitches, you'll see information from all those partners getting together. So this is not a pitch for one approach, one company. This is talking about an industry need. Now, why is it important? As I say, I've done this for 30 years or so. I started off in the storage business, and it was pretty simple. How much do you want and how fast do you want it to go? I mean, that was kind of it, really, and did you like whoever was trying to sell it to you, I suppose, came into the equation as well. We liked to say, and then I went from selling into marketing, both sides of the Atlantic, and now doing this industry analyst role for the last 12 or 13 years. But we used to like to say that data was the lifeblood of your business. It was the DNA, it was the crown jewels, use whatever term you like. The truth was we couldn't really make that connection because everything was locked into different boxes. Over the years, yeah, there's still a lot of stuff locked in boxes, and that's part of the benefit of a software-defined approach is to remove that. But we'll dig down into this a little bit more in terms of some research and some data later, is not just the fact that we can get away from that, but as well as being able to do it, the absolute need to do so. Business, as we know, and it really doesn't matter which is chicken and which is egg here, business is Forget the cloud, business is hybrid, business is dynamic, and we need to change the way we serve that from the IT delivery model. So I did just want to start with a little piece of, one piece of research. This is new research from ESG. We haven't actually published this yet, but it will be out in the next few weeks. We were looking at how many people, basically, we were looking at storage generally, data generally. 55% of people, respondents, already use software-defined storage to some degree. Now, you may say, well, is 55 a lot or a little? It was third on the list behind NAS and internal server storage. So those were 63% and 61%, so 55 is a pretty chunky number. Perhaps more importantly, since I guess most people are already familiar with NAS, familiar with internal server storage, there were another 14% who were currently evaluating or planning to use software-defined data. And that just shows how important this is. And as if that wasn't enough, 60% expected to accelerate their spending on SDS. Now, number one in that case was HCI, hyperconverged infrastructure. That was at 69%, but 60% expecting to increase their expenditure. So it's clearly a very important thing right now. And it's tied to everything else that's going on in the industry, the importance of data, the importance of cloud, the importance of business driving IT rather than the other way around. I'm very pleased in a moment I'm going to have a couple of guests to help unpack this somewhat and talk about the value, not to vendors, but to actual real IT users. So with that, let me step behind my lovely desk. My first guest, this is such a late night show thing. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I think that's John Oliver, and I probably just blew the sound guy. I mean, he'll hate me for knocking on that. But my first guest is someone you may know, you may not know. It's not quite like bringing Robert De Niro up, although the similarities are quite spectacularly amazing. Guy Churchward, please join me. Please welcome me in joining. Please join me in welcoming Guy on stage. He's the CEO of Datera.
I do. I like the microphone. It's fantastic.
Would you like to use it?
No.
Would you like to know the worst pun I came up with thinking? Because what was the first thing we both said when we saw this?
Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley. Return to vendor.
Oh, God.
No? Okay. All right. I'll come up with another one later. I'll see if I can do something like that. But,
please do.
So we have a bit. The good news about this format is we have a little bit of time. So we're not particularly rushed. I think we have a lot of interesting things to talk about because we rehearsed so well.
Right.
Didn't we?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we know roughly. I've got some note cards have to be, I don't know, blue.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it. Just shoot.
Okay. No, I'd like to start with how you ended up sitting here. I don't mean for the event today, but, a little bit of your history in the industry and what brought you to Datera.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a bit of a data obsessive, judged on your gray hair and my no hair. I've been kicking around for a fair amount of time, but I did a stint over at NetApp in the storage side. I've run an AI ML company, a security analytics organization, the primary storage business over at EMC, and I kind of looked at what the next thing was, and one of the areas that I got somewhat obsessed about is data and data freedom, and then what the future generations are going to look like. So in other words...
Why is it the next thing, though? I mean, isn't it the oldest thing?
Which one, data?
Yeah.
Well, no, well, yes, it is. I mean, data never
goes away.
deliberately
Not awkward. I mean, I think it's important to draw that out, because I agree with you, but why?
Awkward is a British thing. I mean, we can do that at some point.
Yeah, I hope this gets broadcast over there so people know that we don't actually speak the same language. But.
Okay. So I guess I don't mean the next thing as in data's the next thing, right, because data's never gone away.
Yeah.
But you sort of look at what people are trying to do and how they harness. And I think, again, we're going to dig into a little bit, probably a little bit more around ML and AI and analytics and what I would see as a data-defined architecture, and why data actually is now surfacing over and above, whether it's a hardware platform or a software platform. Data is absolutely king. So in other words, most businesses are now being run by the speed of which they can understand, right? There was a catch in the Bay Area that people said, you're either in your industry going to be the Uber or you're going to get Ubered. And that generally is how fast you can get information that's very accurate to you to make a decision, to make a result, to get back. You know, even in the world of economies now, the commercial world or the consumer world, if someone knows me better than somebody else, so in other words, I'm searching for a goods and I'm trying to find something, if they tag me, find me, they can enrich information around me and it looks like they know me better than anybody else and they've got the right price, then I'll buy from them.
Yep.
So it's this sort of concept of there's just, you know, so much data out there, it's unbelievable. But what I need to do to love my customer and my customers love me is be first to them with the most amount of accurate information to basically beat my competition, if that kind of makes sense.
Well, there's two parts to that. I mean, there's the first and there's accurate.
Yeah.
Both are tricky.
Well, so yeah, and that
Well,
really
both
comes.
have historically been tricky, and it's certainly we should focus on both. I think we focus on the speed a lot.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I'll go back to I was a wonderful company that I was involved with that did log management, it did security event management. So in other words, it had both the lots of data and it had the speed. And there was always this juxtaposition of, do I want to collect all of the data in my enterprise? And that was log management that could only be looked at posthumously.
Right.
And then there was security event management, which was all about time. So in other words, how fast do I know someone's broken in and what they've done? And there was kind of this inside joke that said, what log management was collecting all the information. What security event management was is collecting as little information as possible that you can make a really fast result onto it. So you got into this sort of conceptual position because of technology couldn't allow you to do both. You were either collect it all or you had expediency. So there was that kind of or era on data. And that was the piece that I believe that even though people would describe us going from hardware defined to software defined, and I look at data defined, there's never been a point in time that the industry has never been data defined. You know what I mean?
Okay, hang on, sorry. So we didn't rehearse, but we chatted a bit before. You've thrown out a number of terms that I want to dig into because I think they're worth not just throwing out, but understanding, because I think they're important.
Shoot. Yeah? Is this on your little blue things?
Some of it, yes, some of it. There's a red card here. Don't ask what that is. That's like the ejector button, you know, on the...
okay.
Anyway, maybe that's pink. One of the things we had talked about, deadly serious for a second, in terms of planning what we wanted to cover today, is this concept, I know it's near and dear to your heart, of and or.
Yeah.
So delve into that a little bit more. I'll come back to something else in just a second.
Again, if I use the analogy I've just described, which is, you know, you can either collect all the information or you can have expediency and a result in time. So in other words, you've got time or quantity as two axes.
Yep.
Technology was always at a point where you could kind of do one or the other, but you couldn't do both. I actually think the most profound thing that's happened, because it was almost like when I got to Datera and we were driving software-defined storage, and I was looking at saying, hey, we've moved from hardware-defined, in other words, hardware resiliency, to a software-defined software resiliency that allows me to basically break the boundaries of the system and move things around, because I don't know if I'm going to be hybrid cloud or on private cloud or I'm going to be on-premise or edge or public. So I can shift things around easier.
Probably all of those for most people.
Exactly, and the thing is, why do I want an architecture that basically binds me to one decision? So I want to be able to move agile, so I'm not the next, you know, person to be knocked over by an Uber, if that kind of makes sense, right?
Yep.
But
probably way too much sense, but anyway.
Yeah, actually, yeah, we'll leave that one.
Yep.
But that goes from hardware defined to software defined, and then I was looking and saying, well, it's not really software defined, it's data defined. And then that got me thinking, well, hold on a second. There's no time in my entire career where I've ever sort of thought data doesn't matter. It's always mattered. So what's different now than before, like a year or 2 or 3 years ago? And I think that the most profound change is that the technology advancements have kind of, they're no longer the long pole in the tent. You don't actually have to make a or decision.
Right.
And so it's not that, I actually can't collect all the information if I want expediency. You say, I can collect it all and I can get expediency. And by the way, I can have an enterprise application, I can get it up and running within 6 months, I can have hyperscale if I want it, I can then shut it down, I can repurpose it, I can have a data set that 1,000 users in my business can look at the same data set, and I can shift it around between these multiple places without a forklift upgrade. Why do I have to compromise? Why do I have to always build my architecture around OR? So this is why we've actually sort of shifted to the point of, we've gone from hardware defined to software defined. Software defined are basically data defined, and in data defined you've got to do ... and we're in the and era, not the or era, and that's where it's happened. So basically the advancements that organizations have, you kind of think about the long pole, the thing that holds them back.
Yeah.
The only thing that holds them back now is that imagination and the belief that they can move towards it, and the time and logic. Every IT organization has their own technical debt. They don't walk into a vanilla site and a greenfield site and say, "What should I build today?" It'd be cool. They've got something that runs their business and it moves forward. But from being transformative, it's the fact that they look at it and say, "Look, I need to get to a point where I can utilize all my data, I have ultimate data freedom, I have data agility, I have data flexibility," and it's about buying outcomes from large vendors and allowing them to put together a solution that gives me insight, because I don't just want raw data. I want to correlate data to give me insight to make an insightful decision as quickly as possible and to beat my competition.
So what's interesting is, in everything you've said so far, which makes perfect sense, but I'm just struck by the fact, I know I said up front that this is not a pitch for one company, and I know you don't want it to be. I'm not about to turn it into that. But also what's most interesting is, irrespective of whether it was a pitch for a company or a group of companies, which it wasn't, everything you just said is spoken about from the user's perspective.
Yeah.
I'm not being a sycophant, I hope, but that's interesting and good, because I think the distinction, and I want you to talk a little bit more about data defined and what you mean by that, because again, I think it's a phrase that's easy to just chuck out, and everyone says, "Oh yeah, I think I'll have 10 yards or meters of that." Please, what is data defined?
Yeah. So and again, I'm going to get some hate mail on what I'm just about to describe, which is we'll cover a data lake as an example. In past incarnations of my jobs, data lakes are very good things, because what they do is they drive a huge amount of storage into a centralized location, and I'm a happy bunny.
Right.
But in reality, when I was running the AI ML company, what happens is you have this huge data lake, which is in a centralized location. You're collecting all of the feeds into it, and then you're taking real-time inquiries using AI or ML, whatever it is, into it, enriching the data from this data lake, and you're making real-time inquiries into stale data. You don't know the age of the stuff, right? And that architecture was sort of built in a hardware-defined world, not a software-defined or a data-defined. So the idea of a data lake is basically storage organizations saying the best thing to do if you're going to start and build analytics is stick it all into a centralized location. The issue you have with that is that you're always doing batch analytics against stale data. And then you have this weird position where your main actor is basically old data, and then you're enriching it with live data. Whereas if you could take the analytics, shift it to the left-hand side of the data lake, you literally could get to the point where the main actor now is your real-time data, and you enrich it with the old posthumous knowledge.
Right.
But now you're much faster. So in other words, you've got to that point of understanding much, much quicker, and you can beat your competition that were running on batch. And this is what a lot of the work, and I'm sure that Tom will mention this, of some of the either acquisitions or companies that are involved with, which is shifting across. The reason I mentioned that and about data defined.
Yeah, I knew you'd get there.
Thank you.
Okay.
I do drift a lot, and you're going to get used to that, I promise.
It's okay. I can only do one thing at a time, so we're going to finish data defined.
Yeah, so I kind of look at it and I go, so that was in a hardware defined period, but the issue that you have with that is because that was sort of hardware defined, even though it was in a data analytic structure, it was still locked into a silo. So in other words, you have to kind of get it there, and so the form was around that. Now, I did tell you I was going to get an analogy around Queer Eye in.
You did.
And I don't apologize for this, but I actually, one of the inspirations for this thought process of the or the and stuff and data defined was I was watching Queer Eye, and there's a guy on it called Tan something or other who's the clothes guy, and you can see I'm a fashionista.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so what he was describing to somebody is he basically said, look, how you put an outfit together in a day, an ensemble, is you decide that's the t-shirt, or those are the jeans, or that's the shoes I want to wear, and then everything else goes around it. So there's like the main.
Which did you choose first?
It was in the dark.
Okay.
But you do look at it and you say to yourself, look, there's going to be one thing, and then I build around that. And so when people talk about a hardware-defined architecture or a software-defined architecture, in their mind, they're thinking, what I've got to do is that's the most important thing that I'm building it around. Right. And in the old days, it really was availability of hardware, and that's where you get things like hardware resiliency. Then when they moved into the software-defined, people thought about move the resiliency into the software so I can be more agile. And when I mean data-defined, I just mean it's a ethos where a customer has to look at it and say, hardware's not important and software's not important. The most important thing is data and data access.
But you see, okay, right? So I mean, I think you're right.
Thank you. But we should just finish at this point.
There's a but.
Okay.
I think you're right. Have you been on that course about the negativity of but and the power of and or whatever?
No, I don't talk about buts.
And.
Okay.
No, I think you're on a good track, but I think the difference is, actually I said but, which apparently is very negative, but anyway, there we go. The reason we had hardware definition, is because if you're a vendor, Tom's a vendor, but I'm luckily not. But if you have a hardware definition, I as a vendor can sell you some hardware. If you have software definition, I as a vendor can sell you some software. If you have data definition, I can't sell you your data.
Yeah.
And I think it's a positive shift. I mean, I think that's why you need this coalition, just to talk about that for a second, because it's not just about making vendors think differently, and it's not that there's no business for you as a result. No one's going to shift 100% to a new way of doing things instantly, and probably not ever. There's going to be a mix of the ways of doing things, but you've got to do it in a way that starts from your data, your applications.
It is shifting the. It's shifting the balance and power, and it's listening a lot more to the client. I mean, I think is the point that you're kind of looking at. Even things like consumption models, trendy term, but you used to buy hardware and software on perpetual licenses, and then you would buy it on utility, and now you'll have things like GreenLake that would be on a complete utility, a cloud-based model. Truth be known, would vendors really want to do that? Because the reality is they used to be able to sell big piles of stuff up front, and the CapEx model might have suited them better, but the market speaks,
well,
right?
The point is we don't go back. I mean,
no.
Once the cat is out of the bag and someone shows a better way of doing things, that tends to be how markets work.
Right, and I think that, back on quotations, and I think that Chris Cummins is one of his favorite ones is repatriation rates, and there was a survey done that said 80% of enterprises are repatriating their applications out of the cloud into their own premise again.
Yep.
And I'm very careful because, I mean, at the end of the day, I actually think cloud is a deployment model. It's not a company, and it's not somewhere that's just out there, a morph it. And I think everybody basically has either one or multiple clouds, and everything is going to be deployed in the cloud. And it's not a customer turns around and says, ooh, I didn't like the cloud, I'm moving away from that. They go out, they try out the public cloud, and they go, this kind of works for me. Yep. But there is a certain set of applications that might be too critical, they don't get the performance or latency, or they want better transparency, or the price is too expensive because of the way in which they bill for in and out traffic. Mm-hmm. And so they go, what we need to do is we need to bring that application back. So it's not repatriation everything, it's critical applications I'm going to bring back, and I want to repatriate them, I want them on my premise. But then what they do is they kind of look in the mirror and they go, but on premise, that kind of sucks, because that looks like an old architecture that was technically in the past.
Well, old on premise, yeah.
Yeah, and so what I need to do is I need to modernize that, and that's why if you look at all of the growth rates right now, it's going through the roof on infrastructure as a service to build private cloud, which is private, public or hybrid or public hop, and it doesn't matter how you describe it. But it's basically bringing it in and taking that agility with you. And I think that's also where consumption models come from. And the fact that once you get that data freedom and optionality, which is something that, as a term, we hear so much from customers, and they're going, I just don't want to get locked in. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not to decry Sun Microsystems, in the good old days.
We can, they're not there. So.
Yeah, but I still love them. It was one of those brands that
was
just
true.
stood
there
for.
are certain motherhood and apple pie companies.
Yeah, and they're one of those ones that it's kind of like, they're in that special category for me as a company that really kind of focused on what they were doing. But at the same time, they lock people down the proprietary route. Right. And there's been multiple times where, customers kind of, they buy into something and then suddenly it narrows and they can't escape.
Right.
And a lot of the emphasis around things like open source, OpenStack, software defined, is where customers are basically saying, I need optionality.
You actually, in the dim, distant recesses of my memory, you just reminded me of something, because I mean, Sun was one of those companies that had a lot of fabulous technical abilities and advances that no one else was doing at the time. There was a product, I don't know if you did, Sunray, is that one you came across?
I've had technology from an OEM, a company, I OEM products into Sunray.
But that was virtualized
I'm starting to
IT.
tear up, you mentioned it, it's a long time ago.
Hey, and little did you suspect, but over here we're about to bring, but that was fascinating. But I think you're right, people, it was too far into one stack. People would be nervous. I mean, all their eggs are in one basket at that point.
Yeah, and it's not, you know, and again, I can't mention the product, but there was a product that was a very successful product that I was running in one of the large organizations. And I would constantly go to this one specific bank in New York, and they would say, we're not going to buy your product unless it's not hardware. In other words, it has to be software, has to be software, has to be software. And I said, do you believe that you could build a better system and more reliable? And they go, no, but it has to be software. And if it's not software, I'm not going to buy any more of your stuff. So we eventually made it software. And the next purchase they did was an appliance off us. And I'm like, why'd you do that? And they go, I just need the options, because what I don't want you to do is, you know, lock me.
Yep.
And this is a lot of where it comes down to that data defined thing, which is the idea is, from a vendor perspective, we're all sitting there going, it'd be great to have the customer's data and we can hold on to it, and therefore that's pure. But in reality, the ultimate platform, and it's something that, you know, again, Datera, and it's not an advert, but we aspire to, is to look at and say, what we don't want to do is produce something that said, hey, migrate onto us and you can't get off. We want to look and say, migrate onto us, and by the way, you can migrate off if you want as well.
But that whole idea of a meritocracy
Yeah.
is an interesting one. And again, I mean, for the last, we've both been doing this for what, 30 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
No
one's listening.
No.
But what you just said would have got you thrown out of the business.
Yeah.
Even probably 10 or 15 years ago. But it's changing. I mean, you need to be a part of that meritocratic wave. Now, if I'm trying to make up terms, I mean, that really sounds corny, but I mean, it's true. Because once you've done it, you and the rest of the coalition are showing this, that it's possible to do things in a different way. You talked about one of Chris's favorite, this isn't really a quote. I wish someone would take it though, but something I've often said is a talk, and I think this resonates with what you're talking about, the move from what I say, the move from IT to IT. So when you and I started in the business, we all knew what IT stood for. It was information technology.
Yeah.
But it didn't really. That was the point. Everything you described, IT stood for infrastructure technology, because that was all you were managing, is trying desperately, like what I said at the beginning in my monologue, you were desperately trying to make things work together because it was difficult. Yeah. And now we are beginning to be able to get back sorts of things you're offering, and others, but you know, to talk about the information, to get back to IT.
No, and I do, and I mean, I really do feel that strongly. And again, the company that I was telling you about that we produced the software product, the guy that was running the appliance business sort of was backing off and saying, well, this is a huge amount of money for us and we can't do this and we're not sure. And my CTO at the time turned around to him and said, if you can't make a better product, then they can stick your software on top of a piece of hardware, and then you don't deserve to be in business. You know, and I think part of the industry and the whole thing is, you know, and it doesn't really matter what vendor it is that this is now all about delivering what customers clearly want. And it's almost like it levels the playing field to the extent you've got to run really fast, you've got to innovate like crazy, and you have to listen very hard to the clients and get their combustion controls into them. And that was why I wanted to get involved in Datera. That was why I wanted
that was my first question.
Yeah, but I mean, that was why I wanted to get involved with it, because it wasn't, here's the thing, and it just sort of jumped all over me. I was literally looking at it and saying, I was doing some board work, and I said, okay, I want to find an organization that does software-defined storage, not SDDC, software-defined storage in that arena, but they understood it to the extent that it's all about this hyperscale, it's all about automation, and it's taking all of the fuss out of the systems, because if you ultimately believe that businesses are going to be data defined and they're going to drive their business by data insight, you can't have lock-ins, you can't have silos, you can't have areas and demarcation, and you can't turn around and dictate to a customer, you can only deploy in this model. Right. The answer has to be yes at every single time. And that's really why you've got to peel the covers away, and then you say, okay, how hard is it to make a storage array out of bits, you know, a software-defined network and consumer or commodity enterprise servers? Really difficult. Right. And these guys embarked on a rocket science project, put it together, and then kind of when I got involved with HP, and we got involved with this complete program, which is a way HP kind of beats the hell out of it.
You've got to say HPE, I'm sorry, the sponsors will get really upset.
I did, the HPE.
I don't think there's rumours about Xerox buying HPE.
We could ask Tom and see how he squirms on that when he comes up. But when we got involved with them, they've got this thing called the complete program, which other vendors have a similar program, but basically they signed up, or we signed up with them. They beat the hell out of our products and put us into a specific swim lane.
Hang on, hold that thought a second, because I want to do that with him when he's up in a minute, and we're going to get into customers and drivers and the complete program and do that there. I want to do one more thing with you before we bring him up and talk more about from the customer perspective. The research I quoted, hopefully you were paying accurate attention, but 55% of people saying they're already using SDS. Somewhat surprised me. I mean, it doesn't say they're all doing everything on there, but using it to some degree, with another 14% saying, we're looking at it, we're going to do something about it. Yeah. Were you surprised? I mean,
no,
SDS is a bit of a sleeper, isn't it?
No, so the problem is that SDS has been overblown as a term. And, even with Datera, we kind of looked at it and said, should we pin ourselves to SDS or not? Yeah. And it was almost like, it's like if I said Hadoop to you, would you say failing technology or really successful technology? And there's two sides of every camp, right? Yep. If you look at software-defined storage, believe it or not, all clouds are SDS. If I said to you VMware vSAN is probably, in my view, the most successful example of an SDS, but it's homogeneous to VMware. HCI platforms are all SDS in an appliance form factor. So no, I don't, because at the end of the day, SDS is prolific across these. And then there are technologies like what we have, which is heterogeneous and unbound.
Of course, and everything in IT is software defined at the end of the day. And that's been, I think, both to your point, there's a yin and a yang, a positive and a negative to the term. Because if it's not software defined, it's just silicon and rust. I mean,
look. Here's the problem I have is when you're sitting inside of a large scale organization, and when I'm over at EMC and then at Dell, and I had fantastic assets, like the VMAX and VNX, Extreme IO, stuff like that. All of them were software engineers. I mean, 97% of my engineers were software engineers. Yeah. So you go, well, they're software defined. Yeah. Not really.
No, but that's
because it's the architecture and it's the impetus that go together. That's not to say that they're not fantastic technologies. Yeah. But in reality, you look at it and you say, what does software defined really mean? Yeah. And it says that you can actually have, you've got an abstraction layer that allows you to basically stick other hardware underneath it. You remember there used to be this fun statement of saying, if you want your software to run twice as fast, you wait a year, right? So in other words, hardware comes underneath. The founders of Datera, they were cloud guys, not storage guys. Right. And they literally looked at it and said, look, it's really difficult to kind of move stuff around, and the automation's really kind of frustrating. And what you want to do is to almost create an abstraction layer that allows you to have your software. In other words, all of the data services live in the software layer, not the hardware. So therefore, you can actually then drop other hardware underneath. Right. So if you start off on a hybrid array, and you actually want to move from a hybrid to a flash to an NVMe, what you shouldn't have to do is forklift. Right. And that's the whole point of it, is you say, so basically, it's its own package that it will sit on top of any hardware platform. And if you want to make it go faster and take advantage of all of the new technology coming along, the architecture allows you to do it. Yeah. And that's the difference. It's basically, that's where it is.
It does remain a challenge because it's been an abused term as well as a much used term, which is why I like data defined. I mean, I think there's a lot of value to that as well, because it puts the value back somewhere else. Anyway, hold those thoughts. No, hold those thoughts.
Damn it.
I
had a really good thought then.
Hold that really good thought.
Okay.
Because now
I'm going to jump all over Tom when he comes in, though.
You are?
Yeah, I'm not moving. I'm going to have that thought.
You want him to sit on your lap because that's the only choice, because he's going in that
I'll leave that one alone as well.
Okay, all right. With that, now that I've successfully shut the CEO up, temporarily, I'm sure, we're going to ask Tom Sabol to join us on stage. Tom is the Enterprise Sales Lead for HPE. Tom, join us.
Thank you.
have you come up with a better Elvis song?
I'm not going to touch that one.
I thought Return to Vendor was pretty good.
Yeah, that is good.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, and I was actually listening to what we were talking about, so I couldn't sit here and think of another one. But it can't go there because there's a camera somewhere there that goes right in your face. So
it'll go there.
We want to see how lovely you are.
Perfect.
So, did you hold your thought?
I'm not saying a thing now. They've actually turned my mic off. I'm just in your head at this point.
Yeah, well, that's true too. That's true too. Thank you for being here.
No, thanks for the invite. This is great. I think it's a great idea. I mean, sitting over there hearing you talk about data, I was going to actually count how many times you said data defined, but I lost count after 25.
Is that an okay term? You're good with that one?
I think it's great. And you know, if I could just delve into kind of why it's important to HPE.
No, because this is
I said the E on it. See the E? I said E.
Did you notice that you're, by the way, you're supposed to be
It's my show. Shut up.
It's you, isn't it?
What?
No, I'll leave it.
No, go on.
I got nothing now.
No, I want to hear it.
No,
please.
no.
Oh.
I got nothing.
Okay.
Go on, Tom, anyway, go on.
This is going to be a good next 30 minutes.
No. You said because it's a chat show format. So it's like, so Tom, I understand you've got a new movie out. You know, tell us about it. Anyway, don't worry. It was better in rehearsal. Start off with why are you on this stage? Apart from someone asked you.
Well, there's a few things. So you mentioned data-driven a bunch of times. Data being the lifeblood of companies. A change in the market where we're actually listening more to customers about what they need instead of trying to sell them a box so they can store a lot of data. You know, the market's moving so fast. So the reason why I love that we're here is first and foremost, if you look back at HP's strategy today, okay, it's around 3 core pillars. One is we're going to be edge-centric. So what's edge-centric mean, right?
Yes, that's my question. Yeah.
So if you think about data, where do we believe most of the data is going to be created in the future? Not in a data center, but at the edge, right? So you look at what we've done around Aruba and things like that to position our assets and what we're buying and acquisitions around the edge. That's why. It's first edge-centric. Second is cloud-enabled. You mentioned it. So when I think of cloud-enabled, I think of agility, right? And I can move my data from whether it's created to where I want to put it off somewhere. It's how easily I move that data at the right place at the right time at the right cost point, right? Because data when it's first created may have a certain value, but after you've already mined it and got intelligence out of it, maybe I archive it off somewhere. So I got to be able to move it very quickly. So that's cloud-enabled to me. The last piece is around data-driven. We've said data-driven a boatload of times up here in the last 30 minutes as well.
Oh, good.
So when I think data-driven, I think how can I go ahead and get the most information out of what I have quickly to go make a better business decision to beat my competitors? You mentioned that, right? Because I feel the same way. You know, there's a stat, and you probably know these better than I do, but the stat I heard was, 92% of data in an organization goes unused.
Oh,
Now,
I mean, that number, I mean, whether that's 92, it's north of 90. It's
yeah,
always,
and there's probably a boatload that's crap that you never want. It's garbage anyway. But if we can move that from 8% that's value to maybe 12%, the competitive edge. So that when I think about data-driven, it's how do I get better information? It's why we've bought companies like Blue Data, why we continue to go ahead and look at buying assets of MapR, right, to put all that together across that ecosystem. So those are the 3 pillars. And then you mentioned something else about consumption in GreenLake. The 4th area where we wrap things together is around making everything available to customers as a service. Choice, flexibility, right? So all of those things is about data and being data-driven, okay? And then why I love, and you mentioned HP Complete, so we can either dive into this now or we can.
It's entirely up to you. I'm scared at this point. I'm nervous. I don't want to take any more of these.
He's so sweet. And
I know he is. I'll be nice. From our perspective,
you don't have to be because I'm never coming back. You might be, but
So you guys are too much.
Yeah, we'll see. 10 minutes, we'll figure it out.
One of the things that I like about offering flexibility, and you mentioned not the hardware lock-in.
Yeah.
One of the things that we looked at is we can't have every solution for everybody perfectly. There's a lot of great IP that we have, and we'll continue to go and invest organically and inorganically. Right. But the HP Complete portfolio allows us to look in the market at some really good key software players that are out there where we think together we can provide some value to our customer and deliver a complete solution. That's why it's called HP Complete, because we want to be able to go ahead and deliver a complete solution. I'd like to hear your take on this, because I know when we talked earlier, you had some really keen ideas on how powerful that can be and some of the rigor that we put.
Yeah,
put these vendors
this
through.
was the hold that thought, that one thought
Yeah.
that we were talking about that I wasn't allowed to
So
talk about
I led you right to
before,
it.
Tom. Yeah,
See
thank
that?
you.
Didn't even know.
Again, our journey was around this time last year, right? It was out of the field from a desire for customers to put these things together. We got involved with the Complete program. And there's a lovely chap that runs it that I was chatting to, Chris, and we got put into this defined swim lane, which is basically high performance block, enterprise tier 1 style mode. And then you look in the other swim lanes and you see fantastic products that are sitting out there, and whether it's the WEC and the other guys that are in the coalition. And I just made the comment that, one thing is, I love the way that HP stitches it together, and you can talk about Infocyte and the overall picture, but it's the most prolific combination, because we're an SDS, we're not SDDC.
Right.
You buy an SDDC from a vendor like HP. In other words, customers are buying outcomes, and they're buying outcomes that give you educated insight. They're not buying bits, right? I'm a bit. So basically, we come into Complete, we're a bit, we're in the swim lane. But I said, guys, you've got to push this out, because you literally have, and the rigor that HP has of putting us into the Complete program and testing the products, getting to the labs, and then beating the absolute hell out of it. Because in essence, the purchase order for our product and the others actually goes from a customer to HP. So the customer is really looking at HP and saying, you've got this.
Right.
So they have to feel comfortable that the product's there and it fits alongside their current portfolio and it makes sense. And then you say, well, you should advertise it. You should talk about it. And that was really the impetus of where we are now with this coalition. It's not just the vendors that you've mentioned. It's that over expansion that I was just impressed by the fact that, HP are pretty advanced in the way in which they put this together. And I like the fact that they recognize that, innovation doesn't just start and stop inside of HP's doors. And they have a model that they then embrace that and then drive it out and execute into the field with it.
Yeah.
He forgot the E again, by the way. Did you catch that?
I wasn't going to say it,
Okay,
because
sorry.
I thought I overdid that the first time.
That's
So
okay.
But I just want you to come back on that.
Sure.
Obviously, your customers, and we're going to drill down to some examples in a second. Hopefully, I'd like to do that about the drivers, because whatever analogy you like, you're in the trenches every day. You actually talk to real life customers. I mean, I just comment about them. Sometimes I talk to them too. But I want to hear about what's actually driving their decisions. But they're not all going to do 100% of one thing.
Correct.
So I presume your involvement here is about, it is, as you said, choice. It is if this is the right approach for them. And sometimes we might not agree with the way a customer is going, but they have the right to choose. Or
Customer is always right.
They know where they're going in 2 years, 2 months, 2 years, whatever it might be, and they have religious affiliations with a way of doing something, or they just whatever. It's up to them. So this is about choice.
Yes.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, and so it's choice, but it's also value add, right?
Okay.
So one of the things that we have to be clear that we're not just a VAR, right? So we've got to put some intellectual property around it and deliver a value-added solution, a winning solution for our customers. So you mentioned it, right? So beating the hell out of the technology, understanding where it fits in the swim lanes. Plus, part of the value that HP brings to a customer is when we go to a customer, say, we know this solution works for your use case and your business problem. We've tested it, we've engineered it, we beat the crap out of it, we know it's viable, and HP stands behind it.
Right.
That's a big value, not only to customers, but to partners. Okay, so a lot of times partners get into the, and you mentioned it, right? It's, I'm going to go sell the new thing that's sexy.
The effort
that's
for a
right.
partner to deal with a smaller organization,
That's right.
with all respect, that's what you are, is really stretching things. So they've got HPE behind them.
Well,
So it's a huge difference.
and again, what HP doesn't look at is the technology as it stands on its own.
Right.
So in other words, with us, with Datera, they don't look at it and say, hey, we're going to figure out Datera's boundaries and is this a product that we think it is? But they'll look at it from an SDDC perspective as how does that fit in with the software-defined networking that we have, with the hardware platforms that we have, and they'll look all the way through the supply chain. And when we've enjoyed a good number of wins with HP in the last year, and each of the customers, they also look at it and they say, well, it doesn't just stop there. It's after. What happens when we bought it? What happens if something goes wrong? And it's that little known fact that everybody will profess the fact I've got a product and my product is unbreakable and there's every product breaks. Every product's got an issue because there's going to be that, force majeure moment that just happens. And what you don't want in a situation like this, because it's so critical, is you don't want vendors going, it's his fault.
Yeah.
And so that's also a very important asset because, I've worked in some of the world's biggest infrastructure companies and now I'm in a small one, right? So in other words, I flip-flop around. When you're in a small organization, you might have stunning technology, but you also have viability issues because an organization, a Fortune 10 bank's not going to look at you and say, hey, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my mission-critical data on your stuff with your 80 or 90 staff in San Jose that I don't know any of them.
Yep.
They're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And they're not buying a bit, they're buying an outcome.
That's right.
And this is why it's very important. And this is where cloud comes in, right? And this is where things like GreenLake come in or the overall consumption model. And actually, why Amazon's driven pretty aggressively in the public cloud, because they kind of say, I got it. Just write a check.
But
we'll
by the way,
look after
you
it.
made a point earlier, and I was going to jump in, but you were saying you believe that cloud isn't a place or a company, it's a consumption model. The only pushback I'd have on that is over-agreeing with you, because I don't think you need to sort of cautiously say, I believe or I think. That's categorically true. And one of the things that's changing, I think, right now is a gradual understanding. It's gradual, to exactly that point. Cloud is an approach to doing things. There are, and I'm picking my words super carefully, there are some very large cloud service providers out there.
Yeah.
That's a different thing than a cloud. What we're realizing is that if a business wants a cloud, it can use a cloud service provider for some of it, but it should be a cloud that suits them. It is if you like, a software-defined cloud.
We've got Chris Tinker's kicking around in this session today or tomorrow, right? And he'll describe that, some people actually recognize that their edge is their data center and the edge is their cloud. And so it's blurred, in other words, there's
and it's
no
continuing to evolve.
Yeah, and actually, if you step past this, you look at it and you go, where people are today is they're basically making a decision to move from their current technical debt into basically a multi-cloud environment.
Right.
They're somewhere on the journey, and generally they're around, I'm managing multiple clouds, I'm not multi-cloud. But then their data center then flips to like a metadata center because I need to understand what the hell is happening everywhere else. And then there's this step past that, and it's a bit geeky, but you sort of look at it and you go, what VMware did with a VMM layer is they put an abstraction layer above all of the CPUs to allow you to use the best of it from a density perspective. So when people move to proper multi-cloud, there's then going to be this abstraction layer that's going to sit on top of it like a proxy. And so we're going to move all the way through that. And when you talk to a client, not all clients turn around and say, right, next Tuesday, we're going to be in that environment. But they'll look at the journey and they say, that makes sense because that enables me to basically be data defined and have data freedom. But it might take them 10 years. So they say, how do I get on that motion?
That's a good segue back to, I want to make sure we use some of the time we have left to talk about some examples. Please, both of you chime in because you're all talking to customers all the time.
And a few we've actually talked to together, so.
Whichever ones you care to talk about, I know you probably can't use names, you can hint or talk about the industries, but what I'd like to know is, what was the spark? What made people think about doing this, or did they already come to you knowing what they wanted to do? And obviously, what did they get out of it? So whichever, springs to mind first.
Yeah, so, I'll go back to, I think it's all about flexibility, and it's the unknown of the future. So some customers, you come in and they say, I want software defined, I want 100%, and you say, why? And you get, we talked about this earlier, a lot of different ranges from, I think I can scale linearly, I get better use to stuff. A big one was they believe that they can get more agility and automation if they move to a software defined layer, right? Low on the list, and it's shocking to me, low on the list was the cost benefit.
Well, actually, okay, I'm sorry to leap in immediately, but handy dandy card here because
Did I validate that or not?
No, I'm excited the fact that you're actually using one of the cards, to be honest.
Well, so am I. Go
for it. We're
they're all
here
black,
with a bated
really.
breath.
No, but so one of the questions in that research that I mentioned up front was we asked people what were the main achieved or expected benefits of SDS. So not SDDC, but SDS. What was fascinating to me, number one, by a long stretch, was better performance. Number two, which kind of goes to what you're saying, was a simpler, better way of doing hybrid cloud. That's all the flexibility we've talked about. And then there were a whole bunch of things that if you clump them together were all about hardware flexibility, all of which is probably no great surprise. But what was interesting is OPEX was number 5. I can't even remember where CAPEX was because it was way down there. And also way down, also to give you an idea, we asked people both what were the things that they benefited from and also then to pick number 1. So if I talk about that number 1 pick, for the better performance that was at the top of the list, it was 19%. That was their number 1 thing, which is interesting. The other things I mentioned were all in the 11 or 12%, but just simpler storage management was 4%.
Yeah.
That's fascinating because I think when the whole SDS wave or opportunity first came out, that was what got talked about. Like, hey, it's so much simpler. And perhaps it's because all storage has got simpler, quite honestly. But I think it's fascinating, these other things that are coming to the fore. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you, but it kind of supports what you're saying.
Way back when, right, when this was top of mind to customers, a lot of it was all about cost.
Yeah.
And it's flipped.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to drive commodity hardware and get really, really cheap, white box, put some intelligent software on it, and now I can go ahead and get scale.
Remember when the cloud was about cost?
That's it, right?
Yeah.
But the automation side now is
That's
real
key. And it's about flexibility.
Yeah.
It's the flexibility.
Yeah, we got a client who they do almost like a SaaS-based data rooms, legal. And well, they were having a challenge where basically their people cost, their human capital cost, was scaling in parallel with the customers. So they bring a customer on, they would drop almost dedicated arrays in, and their people costs were just going up, up, up. So at some point, their issue was not performance or scale, but it was, and it wasn't cost as in it was cheaper, but the issue was automation. Because what they were basically saying is my human capital cost of managing these things is too high. I want to get to a point of, how do I have much higher flexibility in the back of it, and how do I get to a lights-out data center? I don't want to do things like forklift upgrades. I want flexibility to be able to handle what I need to be handled. But it's almost like the unwritten thing that every client that we talk to, when they mention it, and performance, by the way, tricky words, because performance can be very high performance, as in fast. It can be performance as in predictable performance that we see a lot, and it can be performance as an extremely low latency. But the applications that we're involved with, because it's the high performance block, it's basically, I want tier 1 performance in an SDS form factor because I've made the decision to move there, because the way in which it automates and the way in which I've got to scale for the future and keep up with the future without spending linearly on one of the others, I have to move to this model.
Right.
And Guy, and there's one I recall, consistency and predictability of that performance as you go through was most important as well.
Yeah.
And the one maybe that's a good example. I'll give another one. I'd love to hear a couple of anecdotes about what people have actually achieved. Not just saying, well, they got what they wanted, but anything tangible you can share?
Well, it's interesting. Let me just talk about two different journeys. And then we can come back to your question. So I see 2 kinds of customers. One that you show up and all they want is software defined for all the reasons we talked about, or maybe it was like cloud. My boss said I have to do it, so I'm going to go do it, and by golly, I'm going that way, right? And it's not easy for large corporations. So the larger the corporation, the more processes they have, the more legacy infrastructure they have, the more process they have around that legacy infrastructure. It just doesn't work.
Bought into the old way of doing things.
So what they've actually had to do is separate and say, you are now legacy, and we are now moving and having a separate software-defined group. So any new application that comes in, any kind of new Mode 2 app is going to go this way. And then we'll look in the legacy environment, and things that can move will move. Things that can't, we'll just manage. So they looked at it as, I've got a separate group, separate team of people. Other companies look at it and they say, well, I'm not going to be able to go do that, right? I got culture issues. And they're looking at bringing it in and doing a very a rigorous phased approach. Right? I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong, but those are the 2 that I see that's kind of where they fall on the spectrum.
Right.
What's interesting that we talked earlier is if you can get all the benefits of automation and getting data and getting better information from your data, those that do it faster in the right fashion may get better competitive advantage.
Yeah, and it's difficult to articulate all of the value prop that they get. I mean, for instance, we had one client who turned around and moved from Amazon, believe it or not, public cloud, repatriated, bought it in-house, and they saved 70% on their administration costs just by doing that. So you get that, but the analogy I kind of like, because when I got involved with Datera, and the first time I saw the dashboard of all of the data feeds coming in, which is really a lot of the telemetry, it struck me of the almost the competitive position if you think of Tesla, bad overworked example, but if you think of Tesla, why people say they've got 2 years or 3 years ahead advantage of anybody else versus someone like Audi, Volkswagen comes up with basically the first electric car was the A3.
Right.
But they were people who basically built a car who said, well, an electric car, Tesla is basically, it's an electric engine. So if I pull out the combustion engine, put a drive motor in, put a bunch of batteries, job done. But if you look at it, Tesla's actually about the telemetry. And what I find fascinating, and I ended up begrudgingly buying one, and I got obsessed about it.
Begrudgingly?
Yeah, because I didn't want to be the trendy guy. It's just, that's not kind of my thing.
Just his dress, right?
No, it is.
You were a nanosecond ahead. Okay.
God, in my mind, I've got an inner voice of some very swear words for you two, but I'm gonna leave it. But you look at it and you go, the autopilot on a car like that, what's fascinating is what they collect and then how they use the data. And this comes down to that data driven, right? So, so I put it on autopilot and I found myself, I was driving up, funny story, not really, but I was driving up 280 up north here, up to Palo Alto, and I wanted to go off of Sand Hill, but I was listening to an audiobook and I wasn't paying attention. And the car literally was on the outside lane, starts indicating, pulls over, goes in, slows down, and it takes the traffic. I'm like, God almighty. It doesn't do it on every junction, but it does it on a large majority. And what you realize is what Tesla's doing is, it's every time anybody in one of their cars anywhere in the world hits the indicator button, it basically logs it where it's hit it on the road, and it tags it to it. And then it's trying to learn the behavior of how people, do you slow down first, or do you indicate first, and how far away from a junction? And then learning. So basically that's a company that's got the competitive advantage around data and telemetry, whereas if you think about it, Audi's looking at it and saying, hey, we're a car manufacturer, all we're going to do is slap an engine in. Which one won? Now, it'll change because now they're catching up, because the industry is now listening really hard and realizing what it is. But that's what these customers are sort of looking at.
So, Tom, sorry, we only have a few minutes
No,
left.
I'll just, go ahead.
Go on. No,
I was going to jump into what you said about telemetry. It reminded me. I don't know if I got into the second value add of what we do with Complete and why I'm excited about all these companies here in the consortium, is all the telemetry data that you are creating, right? We're now with our InfoSight product, which is our AI operations tool. Not only does it do our own products, right? Started off with storage into servers now, but we're also opening up our API so we can actually get telemetry information from our partners. Right. So now, again, from a customer perspective, it's flexibility. Yes, they can leave and move on, but if we can provide better information, collecting all this data, and given the experience world class, we hope they don't leave.
Right.
So that's kind of how we're tying that together.
And where I wanted to go, which sort of plays off that, obviously, InfoSight helps people analyze where they should go in terms of what would most improve their business operations, or their IT operations. Do you find, to Guy's point, do you find, once you get into one industry or one area, do customers talk to each other? I'm fascinated. There are so many obvious benefits to everything we're talking about. Why isn't it moving even faster?
Well, so I think it does in pockets, right? So if you look in the financial industry, at least in New York City, they all talk.
Right.
They all go to dinner. They all talk.
Yep.
The pharmaceutical industry, right, which is in New Jersey, right? They all talk as well. Not as much as the finance guys. So I guess it's just they're very chatty, right? So they speak a lot, and then I think every different segment is different. So I think we're seeing a lot of velocity in the financial space because they speak a lot and there's a value to them, right? Getting information a nanosecond, if I can do a trade, a second faster than a nanosecond faster than somebody else, there's value to that. You can monetize it.
Yeah, they're also used to data and the value of time and data with things like FX trading. So for them, it comes naturally, and there's also a lot of people exchanges. I don't know how to put it, but they jumping around.
They move around a lot.
Everybody knows everybody in the market.
Yeah.
So we're out of time. Sorry, this has been an amazingly fast hour. I'm going to give you just 30 seconds each, if you don't mind. Just, where to next with this? What is the future is? I'm presuming we're going to say it is bright, but just in 30 seconds or so, what's holding it back? What can make it go faster?
We've already covered it. I think I'm excited about events like this. This is the first one we've put together, and again, we've sponsored it because we want to kickstart this thing at the coalition. I think the closer vendors can work together, the better, because customers are absolutely zero tolerant of components now. They want outcomes. And so you're only going to see this get better, and I think listening to them, I get a thrill out of it, not just because of the software defined, but because we are, what you described is data is about the customer. It's not about the vendor, and the models are the same way. And so now I sort of look at it and go, okay, let's get people on the journey, and then let's try and make sure that wherever we get them, it doesn't get locked. Do you know what I mean? In other words, it needs to move forward. And I think that practice is going to happen, and we're going to then get to proper multi-cloud much faster. At the moment, I'm seeing multi-cloud, and what I saw legitimate production multi-cloud is 5 to 7 years out. I'd like to see it as 5 and less years out, because I think that's going to help us accelerate much faster.
Last words?
Yeah, so for me, I think from an HPE perspective, why we're really excited is, if you look back to where I started our strategy, I think for the first time in a long time, and I've been here 19 years, I think we're a little ahead, right, of those 3 pillars I talked about, them wrapping as a service. So how we can accelerate that move and make it, again, easy and flexible for customers is valuable for us, valuable for our partners, and most importantly, valuable for the customers in the industry.
All right, Tom and Guy, thank you very much for your time. I'd like to thank everyone out there for watching, whether this is live or you're seeing a repeat sometime. Hopefully what we did, again, I hope this was both informational, educational, and a little bit of fun at times as well. And that if nothing else, you're inspired by some of the messages you've heard here and some of the opportunities to join the more in-depth analysis and education sessions which start tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you very much.